Sweden has recently taken a step that is causing serious concern for Putin, as Russia risks losing one of its most effective battlefield tools, the glide bomb. These munitions played a key role in halting Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive and also prevented Ukrainian forces from building strong defensive positions around Avdiivka. Now, Sweden has moved forward with a plan that could shift this balance in cooperation with Ukraine. A total of 36 Gripen fighter jets are expected to be delivered to Ukraine either by the end of this year or in early 2027. Out of these, 16 will be provided as donations, while 20 more will be supplied through a European Union loan arrangement. Volodymyr Zelensky has also indicated ambitions to eventually secure up to 150 aircraft in total. He described the goal as reaching the full fleet as soon as possible. These aircraft are already being described as having a serious impact on Russian forces by introducing multiple layers of advantage along the front line. One of their most important effects is reducing the effectiveness of Russian glide bomb operations. At the same time, Ukraine is also working on its own glide bomb capabilities and has reportedly carried out successful testing. When both developments are combined, projections suggest that by early 2027, the Gripen fleet could not only neutralize Russia's glide bomb advantage, but also enable Ukraine to use similar tactics against Russian positions. At present, Russia appears to have no clear answer to either of these emerging threats. To understand the importance of this shift, it is necessary to look at how glide bombs have been used and how countermeasures are evolving. Glide bombs rely on a relatively simple principle. Russia converts standard freefall bombs from its stockpile by adding wing kits and satellite guidance modules. This turns them into precision-guided weapons, without requiring entirely new designs. Russian pilots typically fly at high altitude, often dozens of kilometers behind the front line, release the bomb, and immediately return to safety. Ukrainian air defenses cannot reach them in this zone. Once released, the weapon glides toward preset coordinates using satellite navigation. Although these munitions are not highly advanced and struggle against moving targets, they are extremely effective against fortified positions and fixed infrastructure. A direct strike from a warhead of 1.5-ton explosive force can destroy even heavily reinforced defenses. This capability gave Russia a major battlefield advantage. During Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive, Western-trained units attempted to advance, but repeated glide bomb strikes disrupted supply routes and halted momentum. The fighting around Avdiivka became especially severe, with Ukrainian troops holding underground positions for weeks before eventually being overwhelmed by sustained bombardment. This marked one of the last major strategic objectives Russia managed to secure at high cost. The destructive role of glide bombs was central to that outcome. However, modern warfare shows that no weapon remains dominant forever, and Ukraine has developed countermeasures. According to field reports and radar intelligence, Russia now often requires as many as 17 glide bombs to successfully strike a single strategic target. This represents a 1 to 17 effectiveness ratio. Ukraine has deployed extensive electronic warfare systems and signal jamming networks along the front line. These systems interfere with satellite guidance links, disrupting bomb accuracy and causing many munitions to fall in empty terrain. As a result, Russia is increasingly forced to launch large numbers of bombs simply to achieve limited precision. Even so, the issue is not fully resolved. Russia's stockpile remains vast, and the sheer volume of launches can still produce occasional successful hits. This continues to create serious challenges for Ukraine's military leadership. The central question remains how Ukraine can overcome sustained glide bomb pressure in order to regain and hold territory. The Gripen fighter jets are presented as a key element in resolving this tactical deadlock. Russia's air advantage has relied on three main factors: superior strike range, Ukraine's dependence on fixed airfields, and unilateral deep strike capability. The Gripen platform is expected to challenge each of these elements. A major part of its effectiveness comes not from the aircraft alone, but from its weapon systems, particularly the MBDA Meteor missile. Russia's SU-35 fighters operate in a comparable performance range. The balance is therefore described as nearly even. However, Meteor is presented as a system capable of shifting that balance toward Ukraine. Its engagement range is around 150 km to 200 km. The key distinction lies in propulsion. Conventional missiles rely on a rocket motor that burns out, after which speed drops during the final phase of flight. Meteor instead uses a ramjet engine. It continuously draws in air and maintains thrust throughout the entire engagement, keeping high speed until impact. This creates a no-escape zone that is significantly larger, described as roughly 3 times that of AMRAAM. The International Institute for Strategic Studies refers to Meteor as the most capable air-to-air missile currently fielded on Western fighter platforms. This capability introduces a scenario in which a SU-35 pilot could be struck before detecting the Gripen aircraft targeting them. SU-34 bombers tasked with heavy payload strikes may be forced to operate from much greater distances, reducing accuracy in the process. Beyond aircraft interception, Meteor is also described as capable of engaging a Caliber-type cruise missiles in flight. Combined with short-range Iris-T systems, it can also counter waves of Shahed drones. This creates a layered response where fighter jets, cruise missiles, and drones can all be addressed through a single platform. In addition, Swedish pilots are said to have real combat-adjacent experience interacting with Russian air forces, and these same pilots are expected to participate in training Ukrainian crews. Another key Russian advantage has been the ability to strike Ukrainian aircraft at their bases. Fixed airfields allow for predictable targeting, especially when visible through satellite surveillance. The Gripen system was designed specifically to eliminate this vulnerability. This design philosophy dates back around 40 years. During the 1980s, Sweden prepared for a scenario in which Soviet forces would attempt to disable all airfields within the first hours of conflict, destroying hangars and rendering runways unusable. The response became the BAS-90 doctrine. Under this concept, aircraft can take off from short highway segments of around 800 meters. Maintenance equipment is compact enough to be transported in a single vehicle. The system was designed for operation by conscript-level personnel. Operational data highlights the difference in cycle times. A Gripen can complete landing, refueling, rearming, and takeoff within roughly 10 minutes. The same cycle for an F-16 exceeds 30 minutes. Maintenance requirements also differ significantly, with approximately 10 hours per flight hour for Gripen, compared to about 15 to 20 hours for the F-16. This reduces personnel demands and increases operational airtime. The Swedish Defense Minister Johnson summarizes this doctrine by describing it as an aircraft built for a nation that may face a numerically superior adversary while operating under pressure and from dispersed bases. In practice, the aircraft can take off from a highway in the morning, refuel at a forest location at noon, and land at a different site in the evening. This mobility makes Russian targeting far more uncertain. Expensive missiles may be expended on empty runways as a result. This flexibility also removes the risk of a coordinated strike, eliminating Ukrainian air power on the ground. A key concern shifts to what the aircraft can deliver to the battlefield rather than where it is stationed. The Gripen-E is capable of carrying both 2 Storm Shadow cruise missiles and air-to-air weapons in a single mission, enabling dual-role operations. Storm Shadow has already been used effectively in Ukraine. It has a range between 250 km and 560 km and carries a 450 kg warhead. Its dual-stage design first penetrates reinforced concrete before detonating inside hardened structures. Previously, Storm Shadow was launched from SU-35 and F-16 platforms, both dependent on fixed bases and therefore predictable in launch patterns. The Gripen changes this equation. Storm Shadow can now be launched from an aircraft that operates from highway strips in the morning and appears from unexpected directions. This alters the concept of deep strike asymmetry, where one side can strike deep into enemy territory while remaining largely immune to retaliation. With Storm Shadow's range mapped onto the battlefield, Ukraine's strike reach expands significantly. The land corridor linking Crimea to the mainland, including the line from Zaporizhzhia to Mariupol, falls within range. Rail junctions, fuel depots, and ammunition hubs along this corridor are also exposed. This corridor functions as a critical supply route for Crimea. The Kerch Bridge has already been damaged, and ferry routes have been targeted. Individually, each aircraft is highly capable, but the real threat may come from their combined use. Ukraine is expected to operate 3 different NATO fighter platforms at the same time. The F-16 serves as a proven ground attack aircraft and radar suppression system, integrated into NATO logistics networks. The Gripen brings air control capability and dispersed deep strike potential, combining air superiority functions with Meteor missile operations and Storm Shadow strike missions supported by highway-based deployment. The Mirage 2000 adds a third multipurpose element to the structure. Each platform carries a different radar signature, a different weapons loadout, and a different operational basing concept. This combination is what could create a serious challenge for Russian forces. If air defenses are configured to counter F-16 operations, they may become vulnerable to Gripen equipped with Meteor missiles. If Russian forces instead prioritize tracking dispersed Gripen launch points, they may expose themselves to F-16 radar suppression strikes. A single target could be engaged from 2 separate aircraft, arriving from different directions and at different times. This creates a high-speed saturation effect designed to overwhelm air defense systems. The resources required to counter all 3 threats simultaneously would need to be pulled from frontline positions. As a result, any attempt to neutralize one threat may open gaps elsewhere in the defensive network. At the same time, Ukraine is developing its own glide bomb capability. By 2027, while Gripen reduces Russia's glide bomb effectiveness, Ukraine is expected to use the same method against Russian positions, since Russia has no effective counter to this approach. The strategic picture is beginning to reverse. The deployment of 36 aircraft is significant, but it is only described as the first stage. The initial group consists of 16 Gripen CD aircraft donated from Sweden's inventory, already combat ready, with delivery scheduled for early 2027. An additional 20 Gripen-E aircraft will be purchased through European Union credit, with deliveries planned from 2030 onward. Beyond this, a much larger framework exists in the background. In October 2025, a letter of intent covering 100 to 150 Gripen-E aircraft was signed, potentially marking Saab's largest export order in history and a major strategic milestone. Under a November 2025 memorandum, starting from 2033, part of Gripen production is planned to be carried out directly in Ukraine. If implemented, Ukraine could transition from an importer of fighter jets into a domestic producer. However, the timeline remains long and uncertain. The first Gripen CD aircraft are expected in early 2027, but pilot conversion training requires 6 to 9 months. The earliest possible combat deployment is projected for late 2027. Full operational capability for Gripen-E is expected between 2031 and 2032. Meanwhile, Russia continues to maintain significant air power, including hundreds of SU-35 and SU-34 aircraft, along with operational S-400 systems. Russia is also expected to develop countermeasures, including electronic warfare systems targeting Meteor missiles and enhanced satellite surveillance aimed at detecting dispersed air bases. Every technological advantage may eventually face countermeasures. However, the strategic signal itself is already having an effect. These preparations draw resources away from other operational fronts. Four years earlier, the Ukrainian Air Force relied on aging Soviet MiG aircraft with limited spare parts and declining missile stocks. Today, it is preparing to operate 3 different NATO platforms simultaneously. The balance of Russia's 3 key advantages is being challenged. Range superiority can be disrupted by Meteor systems. Fixed airfield vulnerability is reduced by dispersed base operations. Deep strike asymmetry can be reversed through Gripen platforms carrying Storm Shadow missiles. At the same time, Ukraine is developing its own glide bomb capability. By 2027, as Russia loses its advantage in this area, Ukraine is expected to gain similar capability. Sweden originally designed this aircraft 40 years ago in anticipation of a potential Soviet invasion. Now it is being transferred to a country actively engaged in confronting the same historical threat. The situation continues to evolve. The next phase will determine how these systems are ultimately deployed and countered. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.